All right. All right, I guess no countdown. So here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Philadelphia Eagles pregame show here on Philly Sports Reports. We have Sam Heine joined by Matt Brown. Ben is at the game today, so we'll be taking you and previewing this Eagles game. Tough one for the Eagles last week as they fall to Los Angeles Chargers on Monday Night Football. They fell in overtime. Really tough game for the offense, great game for the defense, and unfortunately, it's the Eagles' third loss in a row. So they'll try to bounce back today as they take on the 2-11 Las Vegas Raiders in Philadelphia. Matt, how are you feeling about today's game?
How am I feeling? I feel terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't have a good feeling about today's game. It really feels like the 2023 season is becoming the 2025 season. And if y'all remember the 2023 season where a West Coast team came out in December to play a Philadelphia Eagles team that was not good, was honestly had no business being anywhere near a playoff race. That was 11.5-point favorites on a cold winter day. You remember how that game went. It was disgusting. It was terrible. And I feel like it's deja vu today. I know this Raiders team is not good, but neither is this Eagles team. They might be the most fraudulent 8-5 team I've ever seen. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but this team has not been playing well. Yeah. The offense has not looked good. The defense is there, but at times not. And I don't know what to think of this team. It's my opinion of this team is going to be very different later, I think, but there's a good chance that a loss today by the Eagles could just end their season. Like, it could be over.
Yeah, it's crazy coming into this game. You really would think that the Eagles should be able to go and just kind of win this game pretty easily, but it's hard to say that they're going to beat anybody easily right now. They did obviously play a lot better last week against the Chargers. I mean, the defense was amazing, but I mean, the offense just continues to struggle. Jalen obviously had the worst game of his career last week, and I want to get into Jalen's performance a little bit from last week. Unfortunately, I was out at that game. Obviously a great time being in Los Angeles and Southern California. Doesn't take away anything from the trip, but going and experiencing that game in person, it was pretty horrible. So, last week Jalen finished the game 21 of 40, 240 yards, 4 interceptions, 1 fumble, and no touchdowns. The last interception obviously coming with the chance to win the game, turning the ball over in overtime, and that ended the game right there. And Matt, I just want to hear what you thought about his game last week, and honestly, his play over these last couple weeks. 5 weeks in a row now where he really hasn't been playing that well, and now we're at the point where we're this deep into a season where you can kind of look back at the whole season, and obviously it's not over yet. A lot of things can change. We know how last year he wasn't playing that great, and then he turned things around in the playoffs. But as of right now, last week, last couple games, what are your thoughts on how Jalen's been playing?
His play has been terrible. There's no other way to put it. I think this is the worst he's ever looked as the Eagles starting quarterback over a multi-game stretch. And that's not shocking. He has had bad performance after bad performance. The only time he's really looked good since the bye week is the first half of that Dallas game when they threw for 3 touchdowns and went up 21-0. But this has been a bad stretch by Jalen, and we know he's a better quarterback. We know for a fact because we've seen it. We've seen him at his best. We've seen him throw for 300-plus yard games, rushing on the ground, 4 total touchdowns, Super Bowl MVP, Jalen Hurts. We've seen it. But I just think right now, I don't know if it's, fully on him, if something in his head, if guys aren't helping him out in situations, if the coaching staff just isn't putting him in the spot that they need to put him in to win. I really can't pinpoint what is wrong with him right now. It's really tough for me to say. I do know one thing. Last week, while he had the 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions, I'm not going to fully put the blame on him for all of them. There's the one I know people are going to talk about how the ball to AJ that he went through his hands was a little high, and he probably should have gave him a better ball to come down with that catch. I get it. He's throwing tight window spots, the one over the middle. And then the one in the back corner of the end zone in overtime, you can maybe fault him on that. I still think that's a great defensive play, but the decisions he's made have not been great, and I think that's honestly been his biggest problem over these last 5 weeks. I don't know if me and Ben talked about it a couple shows ago. Do you remember did you see the Hard Knocks play during the Bears game? I don't know if you saw what I'm referring to.
So I didn't watch Hard Knocks last week.
Okay,
no.
yeah,
I was out in California, so I didn't get a chance.
It was during the first episode, and he basically missed Devontae, and he.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I did see this episode. Yeah.
He basically goes like, "It's my fault." Like he just didn't see it well, and I feel like that's just his problem right now. I feel like he's just not seeing things well. He's not reading defenses the way he should be. It's a tough job, like I get it, but you're an NFL quarterback. You get paid millions of dollars to do this, and right now I think that's his big issue. I'm really hoping that, despite the bad weather today, I'm really hoping that he turns things around today, gets going against the Raiders defense isn't that great, because if he doesn't get going today against the Raiders, the 2-11 Raiders, what's going to happen in this playoff? Are we going to expect him to just go on a magical playoff run again and be the great quarterback we know he can be? I just don't see it happening this year. So it's a really big turning point for him today in the season, because if one more bad game like last week, this season might be over for him.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And, I think something that I've always said about Jalen throughout his whole career in Philadelphia is that he's inconsistent. He's inconsistent as a passer, and that has reared its ugly head again this year. You see games where you go to Minnesota and he has a perfect passer rating, and then he comes and he has games with these 5-game stretches of really poor play. You go even last year, the whole season, really, he was inconsistent as a passer. He had a good game, he had a few bad games. He obviously played his best in the Super Bowl, but leading up to the Super Bowl, even in the playoff games, I didn't think he played that well in the passing game in Green Bay and the Rams game. Obviously, the Rams game had some weather in it, but even in Green Bay, I didn't think he was that great. But then he turns it on in the Super Bowl. So, this is who he has been. His whole career is up and down, and I think this year the biggest thing for him is that they've had to ask him to do a lot more, because their running game is not there. Something that has been a big thing with Jalen, with people who don't think that he's as good as a lot of people do, is they say, well, everything's perfect around him, and he needs everything perfect around him for him to be good. And so far this season, it seems like those people are being proven right, because when they can't run the ball and they're forced to pass the ball, Jalen has shown this year that he can't carry the offense to be a prolific passing offense, with him at the helm. And, last week there was a lot of talk about all the interceptions and, this one wasn't on him, this one wasn't on him. I do think I thought obviously AJ Brown needs to come down with that ball, but if he puts it on his numbers, that's a catch. But then also at the same time, like, you have to look at the whole team, because he does, even with how bad he played, he still gave them a chance to win the game at the end with that bomb to AJ Brown that it was a good play by the defender coming in and knocking his arm, but he's got to come down with that pass. But then, you flip it around, and at the same time, he's thrown into double coverage in the end zone trying to do too much to win the game. So, I think, like you said, he definitely needs to start picking his play up this week, because if it's not this week, then when? Kind of thing. And, a lot of talk this week nationally, locally is, would you go to Tanner at any time this season? I understand why that's being brought up. And, when you're on a 3-game losing streak, when the quarterback has consistently led a passing offense that's one of the worst in the NFL for the past 3 years, it's fair to question, what he can do as a passer in this league. And, it's impossible not to wonder what the offense would look like with Tanner McKee back there in the passing game. But at the same time, I mean, I personally, even if this season goes into the tank, I'm letting Jalen ride it out. I think, he's done way too much for the franchise, both winning obviously a Super Bowl, but just, winning in general over these last couple of years, that even if he is going to flame out, that I'm fine with debating whether or not he's going to be the quarterback in, 2027 this offseason, because obviously you're going to give him next season. But, if this is a situation where even if they flame out and you bench Jalen, I think he's gone, and I'm not willing to do that yet. Obviously, coming off the Super Bowl, even with how bad he's been, in my opinion, especially recently, but also how up and down he's been this year. So, I'm not willing to do that at all this year. I'd rather this season crash and burn and come back and try to see what Jalen can look like after a full off season again, and maybe get another offensive coordinator in there, even though I don't think it's Patula's fault necessarily. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole key situation.
No, you're 100% right. And at the age-old, I've heard this debate from media and news source. I've heard this debate for almost my entire life as an Eagles fan. I've heard Jeff Garcia over
Yeah,
McNabb,
yeah,
Kevin Cobb over McNabb, rookie Nick Foles over Michael Vick, Carson Wentz 2020 over Hurts. Remember Gardner Minshew over Jalen Hurts, and now we're on
yeah.
McKee. Like I've heard every single debate possible between quarterbacks. And like you said, nothing against Tanner McKee, but Tanner McKee has one start in his entire career. I know he's come in for a couple games now, and he's looked good in preseason games, but
Yeah.
like you have $200 million invested in Jalen Hurts. I understand this has been a struggle bus, but this is a guy who has led you to the highest highs of your franchise. And I understand losing 3 straight, it's not great. This season, you feel like you're going to waste this season if they don't end up winning the Super Bowl or at least getting, deep into the playoffs, NFC championship-ish type of run. I get it. You feel like you're wasting a year of prime with some of these guys that you have on your team on great contracts and whatnot. But the fact that going to the McKee the conversation comes up, I just find it so ridiculous. I think it's a tired narrative of them just trying to create conversation and create controversy. And like you said, I'd rather this year flame out with Hurts, because if you bench Hurts, you're basically
It's
telling
over.
them it's over. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's not how you want to handle this. I think the coaches know that. I think the team knows that. I think the front office knows that they have way too much invested in the Jalen and this team to do that. Now, like you said, is there questions about him being the quarterback in 26 and 27 and moving forward? Possibly. We're going to find out those questions more and more as the offseason goes along and after the season ends. And we'll talk about questions like that about whether Jalen's going to get another contract with this team later down the
Yeah.
road. But right now, you're trying to win football games, and the best case scenario to win games is with Jalen Hurts back there, whether
Yeah.
you like to admit it or not. And I know you're just hoping that he turns some things around, but at this point, you just got to let him ride and see how this goes. See if this offense gets going. I would hope that Jalen recognizes this and tries to do things differently and add some other parts of his games. Like a big reason I think that he struggled is I feel like he hasn't used his legs properly
Yeah.
enough. I don't think he's
Yeah.
ran enough.
Yeah.
And obviously getting other passers involved like Devontae Smith. We finally got Dallas Goedert going a little bit last week, which felt good. It wasn't just
Yeah.
the AJ Brown show. And now you have the running game that you hope that is now getting better and can take some pressure off him. And hopefully he can start, mixing more plays in and just not going. I don't know if you've seen this viral clip, but it's the Saquon up the middle, Saquon,
Yeah. Yeah.
AJ Brown deep, incomplete punt. Like that's,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that now that we have a more comfortable offense with more things going, and maybe you get going today, that you can make this offense feel cohesive and make it feel like you can just do more than just run twice, throw a deep ball for a first down, don't get it punt, and that's just the end of the drive. Like I'm just hoping that things can get a little bit better today. It's a really big get well game today. That's how I see this, and it can go one of two ways. Either they're going to get well, they're going to turn things up. 2 games against Washington, a game against Buffalo at the end of the year. They're still pretty much locked for the division. It's going to be really hard for them not to win the division. They have to literally lose out. But either they get going today, they use this momentum to ride the rest of the season, or like I said, it's going to be a 2023 Arizona Cardinals game all over again. And this is the game where you're going to be like, yep, they're still going to make the playoffs. They're going to play whoever in the first round. What's the 5 seed? Seattle in the first round, and they're going to come here and destroy us. That's just how it's going to feel. And you just hope it's not that way. You hope it's the first option, that this is the get well game, get well week, and just the offense and the defense and everything gets going good today.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a huge turning point game in the season. Like you said, this is going to tell us what this team is going to be for the rest of the year. Either it's going to be one of those seasons that's just, it's going to be a slog and a struggle to even beat the worst teams in the league, or this is a team that, showed some signs of life last week and can maybe turn some things around. And, last thing I want to talk about on last week's game before we look into today's game is, a lot of people who are, the film junkies, the film heads, the Greg Cosell's, the Mike Mayock's, those kind of guys, they saw a lot of good things out of this Eagles offense last week. A lot of different route combinations, Jalen under center more. Obviously, the run game was a lot better last week. But at the same time, Jalen failed miserably, trying to do that offense. So, Is this something that you want to see moving forward, of them having the more complex offense, the route tree, the different route trees, Jalen more under center? Or do you want to go back to the old way of Eagles football, boring offense, don't turn the ball over, and that's the formula that wins?
No, I appreciate the making this better. You could kind of see where the boring was getting you because people were picking up on it way too well. Like
Yeah,
if they're dominating a boring offense, then I'd be okay with it. But the entire season long, they were just boring and boring, and they were bound to catch up with losses eventually. You see games like the Rams game and the Tampa Bay game, even like I don't want to say the Minnesota one, but a lot of early season games, you could tell that like the Eagles were getting a little lucky in some of them games, that they were pulling out wins, and that their offense was just lucky that they really had good halves or good quarters that gave them leads that were big enough. I think the biggest difference in how their offense looks is you take a game like Tampa Bay, where Tampa Bay, the entire first half, they dominated that first half, had such a big lead, and they were able to not blow that lead and just do the boring and be able to hold on to that lead. And then you take a game like the Dallas game from a couple weeks ago. They're pretty much
yeah,
the same exact games. Like Eagles dominate first half in both those games. One turns out to be an Eagles win because they do the little things good, and people really haven't seen enough of what they're doing on film. And then you get to the Dallas game. This is the second time they've seen him this season, the second time they've seen this offense in the second half, and they just didn't adjust and they didn't play well, and they ended up losing and blowing that lead. So I just don't think boring was working. I think you had to change things up. The predictability thing was a huge thing. I think personally, I'm you and me both. I'm really not a Petulo, like, I don't want to say hater, but just throwing all the blame on him. I think it's weak personally.
he's such a scapegoat
Yes,
for
100%,
the real problem, in my opinion.
100%.
And I think I agree with like just about everything you said there. I think that I would definitely keep going with the more complex offense. I mean, the fact that people think that these guys have gotten into this point of their career, Kevin Patullo or Nick Sirianni or whoever you want to put the blame on for the offense, and they don't know how to run different routes besides hitch routes and deep balls. Like you're like, I don't know how you can possibly think that these guys don't know how to run a different offense. They've been in other systems.
Yes.
They've been with other quarterbacks. And Nick Sirianni tells you this all the time. The number one thing that they try to do is they try to run an offense to the strength of the quarterback. And when Jalen Hurts has been asked to do more in the NFL as a passer, he has failed. He's turned the ball over at an extremely high rate, which we saw last week. We saw in the beginning of 2024. Everyone loves Kellen Moore. Everyone forgets the first 4 weeks of Kellen Moore. Everyone was saying the exact same thing about that they say about Kevin Patullo. 2023, everyone hated Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson went to the NFC Championship game last year as the offensive coordinator of Washington Commanders. That offense looked pretty good, but the biggest problem was Jalen Hurts was turning the ball over. The offensive coordinators run what they believe suits the quarterback best. Mm-hmm. And I think last week the coaches just said to themselves, "Screw it, this isn't working. Let's see what Jalen can do." And even if it's just from the standpoint of, let's see what Jalen can do from the rest of the season, running a more complex offense. Obviously, the more he runs it, hopefully the better he gets at it. But, 3 straight years, they don't throw over the middle. That's not 3 straight offensive coordinators not knowing that the middle of the field exists. 3 straight years, they don't go under center. That's not 3 straight coordinators not knowing that under center exists. Like there's a pattern here, and there's one common denominator. And whether or not you think that, that's bad that Jalen doesn't want to do these things or whatever, everyone complains about them, but there's been one common denominator over the last couple of years. So, I think that they should definitely continue to try to do these things because, like I said, they won the Super Bowl last year. Are they going to win the Super Bowl this year? Probably not. But I think something that's extremely important is finding out what Jalen Hurts can and cannot do as a passer going forward, because you're never going to have that kind of rushing season from Saquon Barkley again. You're never going to have, the odds of him. I think he's going to be better next year than he was this year. But, it's been proven that when he has to carry the team, he turns the ball over a lot and he really struggles. So, I would love to see them just continue to do it. Hopefully Jalen can get better at it. And if not, then you have, your answer. You have to go out and you have to beef up the offensive line again, because the way to win with Jalen at quarterback is by him throwing the ball 20 times a game, not making mistakes, and running your way to a championship. And if that works, that's what works. But, everyone coming at the offensive coordinator and, throwing eggs at his house because all he runs is hitch routes is ridiculous, because he showed you. I think it was a little bit of like a, this is what we want to do, and he turned the ball over 5 times. This is why we don't do it. So like I said, obviously everyone, we've beaten the last game to death. I think a little bit. I think we should probably move on to this week's game. And just, we talked about it a little bit, so we can just touch on it really quickly. But yeah, I agree with what you said earlier, that this is a huge turning point game in the season. I think this is one that, if they come out, they're able to move the ball, they, have a convincing win. It's like, okay, well, when Jalen doesn't, if Jalen doesn't turn the ball over, if AJ Brown catches all his passes, if we're doing all that kind of stuff, this is something that the Eagles can ride. But if it's going to be one of these games where, God forbid, they lose, or it's 10-7 in the fourth quarter and it's been a really tough one, I think this is a game that's going to really tell us how the rest of the season is going to go.
100%. They got to do whatever they can to just start winning and start feeling better about themselves. Really, if they can accomplish those two things, a win and feeling better about themselves and stacking, good plays and stacking good quarters and drives, then I think that'll be a W today. Like, I hate to say it, but I'm confident this defense can bounce back. So
yeah,
if we get a confident offense today and a close win, I'd be okay with that. Like, I know you want to like blow this team out today. I don't personally think that's going to happen, but it like, if you just get a confident offense going today and you can ride that the rest of the year, I'd be okay with a close win.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is definitely, the strength of this team, and it's kind of frustrating at sometimes, because even you look at last week's game, I mean, the defense really showed up. Obviously
Yeah.
the Chargers offensive line has had a ton of injuries, and but at the same time, they really took advantage of those guys. I thought Jalen Phillips played really well. Jalen Hunt obviously had a really good game. He's really come on this season. Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean. Oh my God, he was amazing last week. Jalen turned the ball over. They went and they got it right back for him.
Mm-hmm.
So they really did their part last week, and it's almost a shame, because they have a defense, in my opinion, that it's not as good as last year's defense, but this is a defense that's good enough to win a championship with if
100%.
you just had a decent offense. But and it's crazy, because they're the cheapest defense in the league. They're the youngest defense in the league, I believe. These guys on the outside. Quinion obviously is a freaking stud. Cooper DeJean last week I thought was awesome. So it should be a pretty good, another good chance for the defense to show up again today. So so going back to the offense here, Saquon Barkley had a really good game last week. Seemed like the Eagles finally got something going in the running game. Saquon Barkley carried the ball 20 times last week, 122 yards, and that really long touchdown run on the tush push. I thought this was the best that he really looked this season. Obviously, there was that Giants game too, but it seemed like there was holes. He was hitting them. I saw there was a next-gen stat that he's only one of 2 running backs to hit 21 plus miles per hour 3 or more times this season, which obviously is very big for all the people who thought that he might have lost a step. I've obviously wondered that as well, but I think last week showed that he still has that burst, but he's just getting hit behind the line of scrimmage so many times. So, is this something that the Eagles can carry over? Is this something that you think can last? Or do you think it was just a one-off?
No, this is definitely something that can last. And to all the people, him losing a step, I may be biased with my Penn State bias. That's my goat right there. I love that guy. I will love this guy forever now. But no, Saquon Barkley is still a dynamic player in the NFL. He was voted the number 1 player in the NFL for a reason by his peers, because he still is a stud running back when he is getting going. Do I think that everything didn't go his way this year? 100%. And I'm not going to sit over here and say that none of this is his fault, because there is. I think there's certain angles on certain runs that aren't going his way. I also think there's other factors involved. I think the play calling has been great for him. Like I mentioned earlier, it feels like Saquon up the middle seems like the play call a lot more than it should be. I think the thing that I'm usually expecting them to be better on, I think the offensive line has not had a good year. I think it's been a very big, major reason why this team has not played well. They have a lot of money invested in this offensive line. 4 of their 5 guys are second year or beyond contract guys. You're paying Lane Johnson top tier tackle money. You're paying Jordan Mailata top tier tackle money.
Yeah.
I think Cam Jurgens.
Jordan's really struggled this year.
Yeah.
Jordan has really struggled, both penalties and a lot with penalties too. I mean, last game obviously took away that touchdown. Debatable call, but at the same time, I mean, it's been a pattern this year. So it's hard to nitpick at calls when it's been something that's been happening all year.
Yeah. No, I think this has probably been his worst year as a pro, which is unfortunate saying that, but that's just how it's been. You're paying Jurgens, I think, top 3 center money, which I think Cam Jurgens has been horrible. I think he's been the worst one on this line. Dickerson, I feel like he's been just playing as a guy who has been hurt all year. Like I remember he got hurt in the preseason, and I honestly think he is playing through injury this entire season, and it's just not going to go away. So, because I don't want to say he's playing bad because he is and he isn't. I just think he's playing through that injury because I know what he can. We know what he can be.
Yeah,
Landon Dickerson is a top tier guard in this league, and he is just unfortunately not playing like it.
And to be fair to Cam too, I mean, Cam's coming off a back surgery. Like, he's not playing well. He's not playing well, but at the same time, a back surgery for a center is not exactly the easiest thing to come back to. And
no,
I think you can do that all up and down the offensive line. Something that was talked about so much last year was the wear and tear on Saquon's body, but at the same time, I mean, it's been obvious the wear and tear on this offensive line has really impacted them, I think.
Oh, 100%. It was people forget about that. They just assume that we're going back to back and everything will be peaches and cream. It's a long season, and people forget we were playing football till February last year.
Yeah,
and then we roll around and I know like everybody plays that week anyway, so it's not that big of a deal playing on the Thursday. But then you open up right the first week of September. You got like 7 months in between to not be playing football. Like some teams, they end the first week of January and then they're playing, on an extra month and a half of rehab and getting better. And like, it's a really, really tough thing to just come back and win the Super Bowl year after year after year. It's really hard. It's a long season for these guys. And they've been lucky that injuries haven't been so serious this year. I think Makuba has been their longest guy. We're hoping Lane is back in the next couple weeks. You lost Jalen Carter for a few games in there.
Yeah.
But so they haven't been really long-term injured. So they've had the guys there, but they're definitely hurting right now. And it doesn't feel good in the wintertime to be hurting right now. The age I think is definitely a factor in some of these guys. I think that's a big thing with Lane right now. I think we're on the verge of the final steps of Lane Johnson, whether it's retirement, or just, him realizing I can't do it anymore. Like either he's going to walk away and think he's done, or he just isn't physically able to do it anymore. And it's a tough thing because you look at the record without Lane, they haven't won a game without Lane yet. So it's a tough thing this offensive line is going through. But at the same time, these guys are getting paid big money to get through it and to be better because of it. And they're even more expensive running back that I don't even know if Saquon's one. I think he is, but they expect this running game to be good because they've invested a lot in it. Jeff Stoutland has invested a lot in it, a lot of his time and effort. He's considered the best coordinator or head coach in the NFL. And you hope that things can get going. So I do think this offense and run game can stay consistent. I think today will show if it really does stay consistent. I think the big thing is they just got to keep going a little more outside, getting Saquon in space, not just relying on the old double team trap play in the middle. Obviously you're going to do that, but try to move some guys, try to get some blocking outside, make some things, open up the field a little bit more. That's what I really hope they can do with Saquon, because we've seen Saquon in space. He can do amazing things. So if they can get that going, I really think the run game can be better. And I think they can help the entire offense as well, because it can take pressure off of Jalen from having to forcefully throw the ball, 40 times a game.
Yeah, and I think something that was really big that they started doing last week was they stopped trusting those guys, Tyler Steen, Landon Dickerson, and Cam Jurgens, like you said, and running up the middle and running behind those guys, because those are, obviously Becton was in that Steen spot last year, and he was really good in the run game, but that's kind of where they've been trying to go, is right behind those guys this year. And they just don't have it. Injuries, attrition, whatever excuse you want to use, those guys just don't have it. And I thought last week they really got Saquon more on the outside and in space. And I think Saquon needs to just hit those holes when they're there too, because, that's something that some people have talked about, is that his vision hasn't been as great this year as it was last year, but obviously the holes aren't as big either. So, I still need to see them put together a few games this year of them running the ball consistently for me to be able to say that, Saquon in this running game is back. I think last week did show that, he still has that burst that he had last year. He just needs the space to be able to make it. But yeah, I like that they were running more outside than they were for the most of the season, and hopefully they can continue doing that today, because like you said, they need to take the pressure off Jalen. We all know Jalen is better when the running game is the focal of the offense and he's able to make some plays. And, I think something else too with the running game is that Jalen's not running the ball this year. Whether you believe the reports that he doesn't want to, or whether the coaches are, holding him back for the playoffs, or whatever excuse you want to use, he's running it at an all-time low for his career. And, you look last week, even Justin Herbert, didn't play a great game. Obviously was very injured, but he was making a ton of plays with his legs late in that game where Jalen, he seemed hesitant. And then all of a sudden in the overtime, he takes off. And it's like, well, where was that all game? So it's been frustrating from that standpoint. Honestly, kind of disappointing. Obviously he wants to protect himself and he's been injured every year. But, as a quarterback who, looks at himself as a dynamic player, his dynamic abilities get taken away when he doesn't run the football, because we all know his limitations in the passing game. So I think that's something that if he agrees and they start allowing, and the coaches allow them to open it up a little bit more in the running game with some more design runs, so that's something too that can open up the running game, because I thought that was something, especially in the playoffs. You look at that Rams game that opened it up for Saquon, was Jalen had a huge run in that game. Started off that playoff Rams game with that long touchdown run, and then we all know how Saquon ended it with that long run in the snow. So I think that's also something that can help them out in the running game going forward. Now it is time for a new segment we've added this year, and it is a trivia question. So Matt, I did not add our trivia question into our rundown because I had to try to find one, but I was able to find an Eagles and Raiders trivia question for you. So I'm not going to ask for the answer. I'm not going to ask for the answer now. I'm going to ask for the answer towards the end of the show. But for everyone watching as well, you're more than welcome to participate, and no cheating, obviously. But with the Eagles and Raiders playing today, brings back a very fond memory of one Nick Foles throwing 7 touchdown passes against the Las Vegas Raiders, then the Oakland Raiders back in the Oakland Coliseum. Matt, my question to you today is, can you name the players who caught the 7 touchdowns? I'll give you a hint. It was not 7 different players.
Yeah.
But there was 7 touchdowns thrown by Nick Foles, and let's see if you or anyone else in our audience can name those players today. So I think if you get more than half, I think that's a win.
All right. I think I can do that.
More than half.
I think I could do that.
So we'll come back to it later. Think on it for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it later, and we'll get the answers for that. So another player that we talked about a lot last week, from last week's game earlier, was A.J. Brown. Really good game from AJ, again, over 100 yards, but he had 3 crucial drops. Obviously, the one on the first play of the game, broken play. Jalen throws a deep ball. Obviously not the easiest catch in the world because he had to outstretch his arms, but at the same time, when it hits your hands, you got to come down with it. Then in the middle of the game, Jalen throws it over the middle. High throw, and I think that if that ball is put on him, he's not as afraid of the hit. But at the end of the day, high throw, hits his hands. He obviously was afraid of getting hit, drops the ball or doesn't catch the ball, and it turns into an interception. And then at the end of the game, Jalen Hurts throws a deep ball, puts it right in his hands, perfect throw. The defender makes a great play, hits his arm at the perfect time. It was a great play by the defender, but still that is a ball that A.J. Brown should come down with. A.J. Brown in the last 3 games has gone over 100 yards in each game, but the Eagles have lost 110, 132, and 100 yards in each of the last 3 games, yet it has resulted in 3 straight Eagles losses. Do you think this is a coincidence that A.J. Brown's finally getting the ball more? Seems like they're forcing him the ball, although I thought last week they didn't really force him the ball. I just thought, being in the stadium and being able to see, obviously the whole field more than you are on TV, I just thought, honestly, that there was a lot of guys open and AJ was open, and obviously he's the first read, but in other games we know he has been forced the ball. So you think it's a coincidence that as soon as AJ starts getting the ball more, they start losing, or do you think it's just or something real here?
I don't think it's a coincidence because we've seen, big games by AJ where he's forced the ball, they end up winning. You take the Minnesota game this year. I think that was the biggest example, him forcing in the ball, and they end up winning. Right now, I just like I said earlier with Jalen, I just think it's a reach thing. I just think that he kind of trusts AJ the most, which isn't a bad thing. I think he trusts Smitty just as much, but just a little bit more. I think he trusts AJ, and I just feel like he has seen things and seen routes that just don't work well that certain guys are running. I really hope that they start spreading the ball a little bit more and getting more balls to Smitty. They started
Yeah, I
last week
think.
they started last week with Dallas finally getting him going in part of the offense because you can't just continue to force to AJ and expect the results to end up going well. Um, I I don't think that his success is the reason they're losing. I just think right now it's kind of a read thing. I just think he's not taking the smart play sometimes. Is he forcing the ball to AJ a little bit more than he probably was the other weeks? Probably, but I think just a kind of a read thing with Jalen. He just has to be better. And AJ's just going to be AJ. He's going to be almost 100 yards a night and 5 to
Yeah.
6 balls a game. Like he's going to be at that echelon, getting a touchdown. Hopefully, um, but you just got to hope to try and get more guys involved, extend drives because you can't just always rely on AJ to be the guy to pick up a long third down. You got to get Smitty involved. You got to get Goddard involved. Even maybe I personally think Saquon's got to get a little bit more involved in the catching game too a little
Yeah.
bit. I know the protection in the backfield hasn't been great, and that's why he's been back there a little bit more. But I'm hoping like maybe some screenplays to Saquon or something like that. Try and do something different a little bit like that. I don't know. I know they don't usually do stuff like that with Saquon. They really have in the last couple of years, but I'm hoping that they start doing that a little bit more. I don't think AJ getting the ball more is why they've been losing, but I think they just need to be a little bit reading. Jalen just needs to read things a little bit more and not just force away into certain guys.
Yeah, I think I fall like pretty much exactly where you are, more in the middle. I don't think AJ. I know some people have said this week where it's like, oh, AJ's having good games and they lose. Well, AJ's had a ton
Yeah.
of good games in the past where they win. I mean, he's a great player and he's showing at least still that he's still got it. A lot of people were questioning if he still had it this earlier in the year, and it's pretty obvious that he still does because he's having these great games. But at the same time, I agree with you. Jalen has shown in the past that he's someone that can kind of stare down his first read and doesn't really get through his progressions really well. And I think that that's something that shows as well when only one guy is having these huge games. And, I agree with you too. Devontae Smith, I mean, where's he gone? It's not like he's not getting open anymore. He's just not getting the ball. Jalen's not getting there with his reads. So I think, it is somewhere in the middle where I do think it's a conscious effort to get A.J. Brown the football by Jalen maybe looking at him a little longer than he should, or more plays being designed where AJ's the first read. But I also don't think it's the reason that they've lost. But it is something to look at as we go forward in the season. Of will they start spreading the ball out around a little more? Will that lead to more offensive success? Will Devontae was on pace for a career year, and then now he's really gotten nothing going recently. And obviously AJ had some pretty bad blocks last game, so that's obviously something effort-wise to look at going forward, which doesn't make any sense. If he's getting the ball, he should be given effort, in the blocking game. So, it's definitely something to monitor. And maybe at the end of the year, we can say, well, every time AJ went over 100, the Eagles lost, and then every time they spread the ball around more, the Eagles won. So, I think it's too short of a sample size to really put anything into it right now. And so now for today's game, we have a former Super Bowl champion Eagles quarterback coming back to play against the Eagles in Kenny Pickett. Don't forget, Kenny Pickett took the final kneel down in the Eagles Super Bowl win this year. That's Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett to everybody out there. So is this going to be a Kenny Pickett revenge game? Obviously, Geno Smith has been playing absolutely terrible for the Las Vegas Raiders. They have really not gotten their money's worth out of him. And then some people are calling it a benching, even though obviously Geno is hurt. But there's a lot of people out there who are saying that they'd rather see Geno Smith than Kenny Pickett today. Do you agree with them? And how do you think Kenny Two Gloves is going to look out there today?
I don't know why you want to keep seeing Geno Smith. You're going to keep seeing the same things where he takes 7 sacks a game throws 2 interceptions, and he'll throw for like 300 yards, and that's because they're losing at the end.
No, Eagles fans are saying they
Oh, they
would
want to
rather
see.
see Geno than Kenny today.
Well, yeah. Oh, definitely, because I got a bad feeling about Kenny today. I really do. I have a bad feeling about this game. I've had it all week, and when Kenny was getting rumored to be starting today, it just made things worse. This is the ultimate revenge. Like, not even revenge, because like we didn't do him wrong. Like, he
Yeah,
was our backup quarterback. Like, it wasn't that crazy. I know they traded him, but like I have a bad feeling about today. I feel like the Raiders have needed a change and a spark to just get something going, because they have good offensive weapons.
yeah,
Brock Bowers and Genty and Trey Tucker, and I think it's Jack Beach, or Betch. I think that's how you say that name. They have good guys, the good young guys that are coming, but they need a change because Geno just sucks. He has not been a good quarterback this
yeah.
year. I don't like to say anybody
rough
sucks in the
year.
NFL, but he's
had
been
a rough year.
brash. It has not been a good trade for them. And, Kenny has nothing to lose at this point. He's going to be a veteran quarterback that just backs up teams for the rest of his career. And who knows, maybe he could go out and win a starting job and look great, and it turns the Raiders around the rest of this year. And that could start today. I don't think against this Eagles defense it's going to happen. I think it's just going to, be a sluggish day for them, not going to be able to score much unless, they get the running game going with Genty. But I don't see it today. But I have a bad feeling inside that Kenny Pickett, of all people, is going to be the reason the season is basically over for the Eagles. So I don't know. We'll see, but we'll see. That's all I got to say.
I think the last thing you said there is my would be my only concern about Pickett is that this is his chance to earn a starting job. Next year you look at the Raiders, they're going to have one of the top picks in the NFL draft. Maybe they're going to take Mendoza, maybe they're going to take one of these other guys depending on where they fall. And ideally, you don't want your rookie quarterback to start from week one. You look at a lot of people who do that over the years. The Eagles obviously started Carson Wentz week one, but then Jalen didn't start. And then, even this year, the Giants didn't start Jackson Dart week one. So, it's up and down on whether or not you want them to. But I think in an ideal world, especially if they do get a guy like Mendoza, who, isn't probably a day one starter in the NFL, but, can develop a little bit. This is Kenny's chance to be the Raiders starting quarterback next year. Or there's a lot of other teams who need quarterbacks out there. So, I think that's the only thing, is he's going to be out there trying to prove himself to the rest of the NFL and to Las Vegas Raiders that he can be a starting quarterback in this league. But, at the same time, we all know what Kenny Pickett is. He's not that great of a quarterback. They don't have a good offensive line. So I think they're going to try to lean on Genty a little bit today because, at times the Eagles defense has been gashed in the running game. So, not ultimately obviously scared of Kenny Pickett, especially against our secondary, but if there is one thing to worry about is that he, is kind of playing for his NFL career and a chance to start in this league next year. And he's going to want to go out and prove it, especially against a defense like the Eagles. So we're just about 15 minutes to kick off. So we are going to skip down to our notable matchups of the day. Matt, what are your notable matchups for today's Eagles game?
So, number one, I mentioned it a little bit at the end there. It's just Ashton Genty versus the Eagles front seven. You call it front seven, D line, whatever you want to call it. I really think that's the only way that the Raiders are going to be able to efficiently stay in this game. If they run the ball well and run the ball often throughout the game, they can stay in this game, keep the ball in their hands, and possibly win today's game. And if they could shut down Ashton Genty today, unlike how they did on Monday night with Kamani Vidal and Amari Hampton, Eagles running rush attack was not doing good. Same as Monungai and DeAndre Swift back with the Chicago game. If they shut down the running game today, I don't see how Oakland even gets going today. Like, I don't see Kenny Pickett passing for 300 plus yards today against the Eagles secondary. I just don't think they have good enough weapons to do it. So if they can shut down that run game with Genty, I really think that the Eagles will succeed today. And then other one, I just have Jalen Hurts versus the Raiders, like just the entire team. We've been preaching it all show. He needs to get well week. He needs to be better. He just needs to go out and ball out and be Jalen Hurts of old. And if he does that, I think that could be great. And that's just, it's not a great Raiders defense today. Their secondary is like middle of the pack for coverage wise. So, and I don't know what today's weather is going to impact. It doesn't feel that windy today, most of the snow is off the ground, so it's not going to be like
Yeah,
tough to.
it's not going to snow for the rest of the game
No,
either.
so I don't think it's going to be that crazy. It's cold, I get it. Like, but these guys, they're going to be wearing gloves. They're going to be toasty. Like Jalen passing shouldn't be an issue today. He's got to get things going today. It's a defense that just is inferior to him and his play and the Eagles' play level. The Eagles' offense at how good they should be, and they just got to get going.
Yeah, I'm done with the weather excuses for Jalen
Yep.
every week that he plays at home. I mean, they're going to be playing outdoors in the playoffs. So if you're going to say that we're going to lose a playoff game because it's cold outside, then we need to build a dome. But so my two notable matchups for the game, I have Fred Johnson versus Max Crosby.
Go on.
Max Crosby is obviously the biggest impact player in this game for the Las Vegas Raiders. He exclusively lines up against the right tackle. Fred Johnson has been injured all week in practice, is going to play today. Obviously could be in and out of there if, his injury keeps popping up. And, whatever we think of Fred Johnson, he's not Lane Johnson. So it's going to be, they're going to have to send help his way. They're going to have Tyler Steen give him some extra help. They're going to have Saquon Barkley sit in there and help pass protect a little bit, which is going to be interesting. Maybe they get Will Shipley a little bit more on the field for pass protection wise, because we all know Saquon's not the best in pass pro. So that is going to be a big one. And, they really need to keep Max Crosby out of the backfield. And then my second one is going to be Cooper DeJean / the Eagles linebackers versus Brock Bowers. Same way as Max Crosby, Brock Bowers is their best offensive player. He's somebody who's on track to be the best tight end in the league in the next couple of years. And Kenny Pickett, we all know tight ends are backup quarterbacks' best friends. They're the safety blanket, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the Raiders offense tries to get Brock Bowers matched up against the Eagles linebackers. I think today is a game where you might see a little bit more Jahad Campbell because he's better in coverage than Nakobe Dean. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup, and I think it's one that the Raiders could try to exploit. Obviously, if Coop's in there, I feel good about it. But if they're getting him one-on-one versus the linebackers, it could be a problem. So next, we're going to move on to our SeatGeek standout stars for the game today. SeatGeek is the easiest and most effective way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot, indicating whether purchasing the ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. By using the code Philly Sports Report, again, that is Philly Sports Report, you will save $20 off your first SeatGeek order. Click the link in the bio or the description to get that promo. Matt, who are your SeatGeek standout stars for today?
So I just beat the drum during my notable matchup, but it's Jalen Hurts. He needs a good game today, and he has to be the star player. I don't see how the Eagles don't win if he plays bad again. Like if he has another bad game where he throws a couple interceptions or just has a couple turnovers or turnovers on downs and drives just aren't going well, it's going to be on Jalen, and it's going to be the reason that Raiders are going to stay in this game if their defense allows Jalen just to not have a good day. So standout star number one has to be Jalen. On the defensive side, my standout star is Jordan Davis. Oh my goodness. Jordan Davis is a guy I feel like that while we've talked about a lot this year, he has just been so good. He was
awesome last week. He was awesome last week.
My biggest concern going into last week's game was not having Jalen Carter on the field. And it didn't feel like it was a difference. Jordan Davis stepped up in that role so huge last week. I want him paid. I really do. I think him and Jalen Carter next to each other for these next few years of the young defense, they're going to be really good together. And obviously, they were Georgia teammates. Not shocked that they're obviously working well together. But man, Jordan Davis is he's going to be probably filling another week of Jalen Carter's shoes. Could be another one after next week as well. It doesn't seem like he's going to play next week either as he comes back from those shoulders injuries. So I'm loving Jordan Davis right now. I think he is playing so well. He is fitting well in this defense, doing the role and stepping up in the role that they're asking him to. So Jordan Davis, Jalen Hurts, I think are my two standout stars today.
I like it. So my standout stars, my SeatGeek standout stars, Saquon Barkley, number one. I think that they did a lot of good things in the running game, and I think with the weather today, they're going to try to establish the run. And I do think that if they win today's game, if they continue to win, and Saquon's a big part of that, they do have a chance to actually do something this year. So I think Jordan Mailata talked about it a lot on his show on WIP, where they saw a lot of good things out of the run game, and they've continued to put some new things in the run game. Obviously, last week the fake tush push was one of those, and I think Saquon can have another pretty good game today. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I like Zach Bond today. I feel like Zach Bond has had obviously a good season, but he hasn't really been talked about a lot because of how well Nakobe has come in and played. But I think Zach's going to force a turnover today. I think he's actually going to pick off Kenny Pickett. That's my call for the game today. I think that he is somebody who's had, like I said, an underrated good season. And, with them trying to get the ball over the middle of the field to Bowers, I think Pickett's going to try to force it a little bit. And I think Bond's going to come up with a pick today. So now into the betting side of things today, the Eagles somehow, some way, are 11.5-point favorites for today's game. The over/under is 37.5. And some prop bets. I'll go first. I like the Raiders with the points. Spoiler alert, I think the Eagles will win, but 11.5 points. Come on. I mean, that is so many points. This Eagles team doesn't deserve that many points. I like the under in today's game. I think it's going to be low scoring. I do think it's cold. The Eagles haven't played well in the cold this year. And plus, I just don't trust this offense to put up a lot of points. And then I have Saquon. I always like to back my standout stars with a bet. I have Saquon anytime touchdown and Kenny Pickett over, to throw one interception.
I like it. I am also going Raiders plus 11.5. I think it's way too many points for a game that I'm not confident this is going to be a blowout by the Eagles today. I am over 3 on my last 3 over-under, so I'm not touching over-unders ever again. I can't get them right to save my life. But I am also backing my standout star. I think Jalen Rush gets a tush-push tutty today. I think they're kind of due to get that back into motion and feel better about that play because, it is kind of struggled with the fumble that happened a couple weeks ago in the Chicago game. It feels like they're trying new things with it. But I think Jalen's going to rush one in today. I don't know, maybe a tush push, but I think he's going to definitely run one in today. I have him also going over his over-under rushing, which I think is 29.5. I would double check, but I think it's around 29.5. I think I'm having him go over. I think today he's going to use his legs a little bit more. Raiders middle is just not great at containing the quarterback well, and I honestly think they're going to take advantage of that a little bit early on. I also have A.J. Brown catching his over 5.5 receptions. It's almost a guaranteed game. He's getting that many balls, and I don't think anything's changing today. I think he easily gets 6 catches and a decent amount of yards too. I don't know about his yards total. I hate doing yard stuff like that when it's for receivers, but I do think he'll get his balls today, and he'll. If they don't, then obviously the Eagles will win today. So I have the Eagles. That's all my locks for today so far.
Okay. All right. So we got just 5 minutes to kick off. So we're going to have to move fast through the rest of the show here. Real quickly, I want to get your answers on the trivia question. Again, the trivia question was, who caught the 7 touchdown passes that Nick Foles threw against the Las Vegas Raiders on November 3rd, Oakland Raiders at that point, on November 3rd, 2013?
Okay, so I have 4 that I know for a fact caught him. I know both the tight ends caught him, Selleck and Ertz. I know for a fact they did.
Yeah.
I know Riley Cooper caught a couple. He caught at least 2, maybe
3.
More.
3
God,
from
that's
Cooper.
3. Okay, so that's 5. I know Deshaun Jackson caught one.
Yeah.
At least
one player left.
Man, it's either like a no-name. I don't think it's Jeremy Maclin. It's like a no-name though. Man, I'm just gonna say Mac. I can't think of another guy. I'm gonna say Maclin. I don't think it was him though.
Deshaun Jackson was the last person to catch a touchdown. So you got almost all of them. I think we're gonna count it for a win for us against. I'm on your team going against Ben here in the trivia questions. So it was Riley Cooper caught 3, Brent Selleck, Zach Ertz, LaShawn McCoy, and Deshaun Jackson. Real quick, we're gonna do one of my favorite segments is the FOCO Fit Check. Thank you to FOCO for sponsoring this segment. Real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description to get a Philly Sports Reports. You can save 10% off any FOCO purchase. My FOCO Fit Check today. First off, I'm actually wearing a hat from FOCO today. And they have a lot of great Christmas presents. Definitely hit them up for Christmas. This was a Christmas present that I got last year from FOCO using the code. And then today, there's no other player jersey to wear when it's snowing than LaShawn McCoy. This is a rookie LaShawn McCoy, number 29. Show the back there. That way we can prove it's not DeMarco Murray. So I felt like with the snow on the ground, there's no other player than LaShawn McCoy. Just 2 minutes left here before kickoff, so we are going to skip to our predictions. Everybody watching, please put your predictions in the chat. Hopefully, it'll be an Eagles win. Matt, what is your prediction for today's game?
I picked them to win. I picked them to win. I picked them to win every single time in the last during the losing streak. So I'm going to pick them to lose.
Hopefully it changes today. All right.
I'm going to pick them to lose. 23-21. Raiders win. I hope that causes a win. I hope I'm doing everybody a favor. So.
All right. Well, I think it's going to be a really ugly game today. I think that the Eagles will get a win today. I thought there was a lot of positives to come out of the Las Vegas game. You know, obviously Jalen's not going to turn the ball over 5 times again. We all hope. But, you know, it's a pretty safe bet that he's not going to do that again. And even with all those turnovers, the Eagles still had a chance to beat a now 9-win Chargers team at their home field. Although it was not a home field advantage, I'll tell you that. There was a lot more Eagles fans there than there was Chargers fans. But I think the Eagles get right today. Well, get right, quote unquote. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I just think with the weather, the Eagles haven't played well in cold weather this year. And I think it's going to be another annoying one, but the Eagles are going to get the win. I have the Eagles winning this game 20-10. So Raiders still covering, but the Eagles getting a nice win. That is going to do it for us on the Philly Sports Report's Philadelphia Eagles versus Las Vegas Raiders pregame show. Please check out me and Matt on Twitter. Our Twitters are in our little things here. Please check out Philly Sports Reports for the post game and then Ben's observations on the game tomorrow. Matt, hopefully the Eagles can turn it around. Hopefully they can get us a good win. Hopefully Ben's not too cold at the game today. And we'll see you next week. Go Birds.
Go Birds.